Thanks so much, Mike, and all council members. I'm honored to be here. Look forward to a very open and candid dialogue for as much time as we have. Look, I've been an energy entrepreneur my whole life. I've been passionate about energy since I was about 13 or 14 years old. So I am all in on energy. But I've also been all in on being an entrepreneur. The last time I had a boss, I was 19 years old. So I got a very new job in a very new situation. But it's been exciting, and I'm thrilled to be here because energy matters. Energy is not a sector of the economy. It's the sector of the economy that enables everything else humans do. I would say from a material perspective, it's the most important commodity that decides how your lives are, how long they are, what your opportunities might be, what your living conditions are going to be. And remember, food is a subset of energy. Food is the energy that powers the human machine, right? And then the other energy we use is what enables, gives us greater power as human beings to get more done, that allows us to produce food more efficiently, and it just changes our condition. Throughout all of human history, life expectancy at birth was about 30 years. From before the invention of agriculture to 200 years ago, global life expectancy at birth was 30 years. Today it's 73 years. That transformation, two things: bottom-up social organization, human liberty. We enfranchised women, we got rid of slavery, we empowered citizens to engage in commerce. The 1840s are gigantically important in this regard, but that's a separate topic. But energy has transformed everything. But today we have about 1 billion people that live lives remotely recognizable to any of us here. We get to wear fancy clothes made out of hydrocarbons and turn light switches on and ride motorized transport. That's awesome. 1 billion people do that. 7 billion people want to do that. The only way from here to there is just massively more energy. That's the trajectory the world has been on. I would say we got off track starting in Europe, the last 20 years, we've gotten off track in the understanding that more energy is just massively important and we need it. And we got off track because of, in my mind, a complete misinterpretation of climate change. I've been in the climate discussion, research, and debate for 20 years. It's a real physical phenomenon. It's actually incredibly fascinating. And of course, it's a problem humans will solve in a few generations, and it'll be solved by technology, not by government policy. Driving up the price of electricity massively and making a grid less reliable does nothing to help solve the climate change problem, but it does impoverish societies, and it does move manufacturing and jobs from high expensive energy regions to low expensive energy regions. Europe is in the midst of almost completely deindustrializing, the birthplace of the Industrial Revolution. We don't want to do that in the United States. Frankly, that's one of the main reasons Donald Trump was elected. That in the Obama administration, we started it. We doubled down in the Biden administration to go to this expensive, unreliable energy route. Americans got very frustrated by that. No growth in our electricity production, but a 30% rise in prices. And they voted for change. Donald Trump brought to bring common sense back. And in the energy realm, more energy production, lower cost energy as much as possible in America for Americans to consume and to ship overseas to all our friends and allies. I could go on for hours, but my friend and a truly fabulous energy scholar and historian, Dan Yergin, I think is going to come up and talk to me.
Thank you, Chris, and thank you for being here, and the folks in New York who are watching as well. I think, I know people, we want to get to climate, we want to get to electric power for AI, but I think we'll start this with some scene setting. You have described yourself as, when you were growing up as a nerdy science kid, you ordered, and not only ordered, but read a textbook on nuclear engineering in 9th grade. Why?
I'm a strange guy. So young, I was super fascinated with history and with science. And maybe the most basic thing was I'd look up at the stars, think of all the stars you can see at night. And as just a quantitative kid, I'm like, how far away are those stars? Well, you can quickly learn, the closest one's over 20 trillion miles away. You can see things quadrillions of miles away without binoculars or a telescope. I'm like, that is a badass candle. How does that work? So I started to learn about how stars work and how our universe works. And stars, of course, are fusion energy. They're just compression of nuclei together. You fuse light nuclei and you release a lot of energy. The nuclear engineering textbook I bought is for fission, because that's what we've harnessed on Earth today. You take heavy nuclei and you split them, and it releases energy.
You then went to MIT to study fission or fusion?
Fusion.
And what happened?
See, I read about fission in high school, then I went to fusion. Because we had a professor come to my high school. I went to a big public high school in Colorado, and we had a professor come down from CU, and he said industrial civilization was going to collapse around the year 2000. This is the early 1980s. And oil, gas, and coal are the culprit of it, and the world's going to end. So very familiar to today's story. The one difference was then it was because we were running out of oil and gas and coal, and we knew we were running out of oil, gas, and coal. Could be 1995, maybe 2005, but around the year 2000, and we'll have mass starvation because we're going to lose the ability to produce a lot of energy. Industrial civilization will collapse. And I'm an optimistic kid whose other dream was to climb the mountains of the world. So I'm like, I've got to work on the solution to that. We're running out of hydrocarbons. I went to work on fusion energy.
And then fusion didn't quite take off. Then you went to Berkeley to study solar. What happened there?
I worked on solar energy and I met a girl. But I'd actually met the girl before I went to Berkeley, but I partially went to Berkeley for that reason. And so when they missed my first paycheck at UC Berkeley, I called up this gal. It's now my wife and obviously mother of children. I called up this gal and I said, I need a job. You know, they said they're going to give me 2 paychecks next month. I got to get from this month to next month. And she got me a job at a tiny company in Silicon Valley called Hunter Geophysics. And that had a technology they were applying in oil and gas. So I started in fusion, solar.
And so that's how you got in there.
That's how I got in there.
So you played a pretty critical role in the whole shale revolution. What lessons do you take away from that?
Well, I guess the same lessons I made in the night I met the girl is that the big things in life, they're not generally planned, right? They happen. I describe the shale revolution and certainly my role in it very much as blind squirrel finds nut. You know, you're out there trying to do things. You may have a narrower objective, but when innovation happens, we don't see how far it can run.
So you could not have imagined when you got going how that the scale would make the U.S. by far the world's largest producer of oil and gas.
No appreciation of that whatsoever. No appreciation. So took years to realize, oh my gosh. And then of course, even a few years later, we realized, okay, we've completely transformed United States natural gas production. We were building import terminals then to bring gas into the US. We won't need those. But it took a while before we built export terminals, which also made a collapse in natural gas prices. Pretty quickly, we could produce more than all the gas the United States could consume, and that collapsed the price. Then we had to figure out, can we do the same thing for oil?
Right. So in terms of innovation, is there a lesson you take away from innovation from the shale experience that applies it more generally to energy?
You have to be willing to take a risk on something. Anything that can be planned out or seen ahead is incremental. If there's ideas that might work, you have to be able to risk money and try them. But the other thing, the caveat to that, because I see a lot of this in Silicon Valley, is physics, thermodynamics, and math, they work. There's a lot of investment in the energy space that I get based on later. The simple physics, thermodynamics, and math say not going to work, and it still gets funded. So don't blindly try things, but if the physics, math, and thermodynamics might work, I mean, there's a pathway. If you can achieve A, B, and C, then try it. You got to try stuff.
So let's turn to climate. At the end of June, you report that you ordered up critical review of the impact of greenhouse gas emissions on the US climate. It's kind of created an extreme weather of its own. It's 141 pages in length. There's been a 400-page rebuttal. I noticed that the lead author of the rebuttal is somebody who debated twice, one of the lead authors of the study. Why did you order up this study?
Because this is this incredibly important topic. Climate change, for impacting the quality of your life, is not incredibly important. In fact, if it wasn't in the news and the media, you wouldn't know it. The planet's warmed about 2 degrees Fahrenheit in 130 years. I could change the temperature of this room 2 degrees Fahrenheit warmer over 20 minutes and you wouldn't notice. So there's subtle changes. They're not trivial changes, but they're subtle changes. But politically, it's been used to remake society, to end industries, to move stuff. I'm a lifelong Anglophile. Like, we're a child of the United Kingdom, the United States, the most successful society ever. The birthplace of the Industrial Revolution, really the most important birthplace of the scientific revolution is the United Kingdom. To see the United Kingdom deindustrialize its economy and just shut down the factories and plants that were innovated in the United Kingdom. And they shut down these natural gas powered steel plants and fertilizer plants and aluminum manufacturing plants. These plants get shut down. They're made now in China or Vietnam in a coal powered power plant. And then the goods are loaded on a diesel powered ship that shifts halfway around the world to a port. And then they truck them to where they're going to go. And they call that green. Like, this is just nonsense. The United Kingdom is very proud. They've reduced their greenhouse gas emissions on a percent more than any other country. 40% reduction in greenhouse gases. So the argument is, well, we're the model for the world. They're going to follow this. What they never say out loud is that where did that 40% reduction come from? Their total energy consumption has gone down 30%. So 3/4 of the reduction in greenhouse gas is they just don't use that energy anymore, which comes from 2 sources. The biggest source, industry left. They still consume those products. They're the largest importer per capita of greenhouse gas emissions in the world. And the other piece of that is impoverishment. If you make energy very expensive, people will heat their homes to lower temperatures in the winter, which incidentally causes thousands of additional excess deaths. Elderly people in poor health, very easy to die of the cold. 5 or 10 times more people globally die of the cold than die of the heat. So there's health impacts of this. It's blue collar jobs get exported. If you're an investment banker, an advertising agent, it doesn't cramp your lifestyle. But for low income blue collar people, you just shrink their life opportunities. And you're not reducing the global greenhouse gas emissions. That will only come from technologies that can bring equally reliable, equally affordable, equally flexible energy sources with lower emissions.
So let's go to the climate report. I mean, lots been written on different sides about it. What is the main takeaway message of those 141 pages to you?
So here, the biggest secret of the report, at least secret in the press, is over 90% of what's in the report is straight out of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change reports. Like, this is not new revolutionary science. This is just making more accessible to the public what's actually in those gigantic thousands of page long reports that no one ever reads, because they write a summary for policymakers that the press and people read that's often directly contradictory to what's in the report itself. So we tried to take 5 high-end scientists across different fields, from atmospheric physics to nuclear physics, to chemistry and botany, and deliver a summary of what do we know about climate change. And of course, the facts that are there are just so little known. And a few of them, the rise in temperature is real, the rise in sea level is real. Both of them are rather gradual and rather modest. If you extrapolate them for another century, will be a little bit, the world today is a little bit warmer, a little bit greener, and a little bit wetter than it was 100 years ago. That's what putting 50% more plant food in the atmosphere does. So there's positive implications of it. There's negative implications of it. One of the negative implications you hear all the time in the news is that tornadoes are getting worse, and hurricanes are worse, and floods and droughts and storms, they're more frequent and larger in magnitude. This is just simply untrue. Like, in the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the collections of data are there. That's not actually happening. The world is a little warmer, it's a little wetter, it's a little greener. Extreme weather damage as a percent of the economy globally and in the US is on multi-decadal declines. Not that extreme weather is reducing. It basically goes on long-term cycles, but it's not increasing, it's not decreasing. But in a more energy-intensive, resolute society, the economic damage from climate change is on a continual downward trend as a percent of our economy. The number of people that die from extreme weather, it was 500,000 people a year 100 years ago, when the world had 1/4 of the population it has today. Today, it's like 10 or 15,000 people. 97% decline in the deaths from extreme weather in a world with 4 times as many people. So again, it's real. Sea level rise is real. It's going to continue. It's not nothing. If you look at the economics the IPCC does, they extrapolate this rate of temperature rise to the end of the century. Their estimate of the reduction in per person GDP is somewhere from like 0.2% to 3 or 4%. So that means like in the next 75 years, we might lose a few months, maybe a year of economic growth over 75 years. Like, that's not great, but is that a crisis? Is that more important than people having a job today and affording to pay their bills? Is that worth getting 20% of children having nightmares about climate change? People agreeing that they shouldn't bring children into the world that's rapidly falling apart. We've just so exaggerated what climate change is. In the media, it's a great, exciting story, but worse for politicians, it's a reason for greater top-down control. It's a reason to shrink the production of energy. I'll stop in a second, Dan. The most offensive thing to me was at the Congress of the Parties climate conference in Glasgow a few years ago. 19 of the richest nations in the world pledged that they would no longer supply capital to the developing world for anything to do with hydrocarbons. So why do I care about that? It's not to grow the hydrocarbon business. It's that 3 million people every year die from indoor air pollution because 2 billion people cook their meals and heat their homes burning wood indoors in their huts. The solution is a propane cook stove. It's not more expensive. It's clean air, and it's completely liberating to women because you can turn it on and turn it off. Women are the ones that gather wood, that wake up early to get the fire down, have to, again, at dinner, stoke the fire back up. I've traveled to 55 countries. If you live in a traditional society, women do all of the physical labor, bear these risks, and we lose 3 million people. That's easily solvable problem.
Right. Well, you mentioned the cost of electric power, energy rates. So let's pivot now to electric power. Now that you're in this job looking at the US electric power system and the expectations that AI will impose a lot more demand on electric power, how does our electric power system look to you?
Oh, very concerning, very concerning. Again, people are angry today, and rightfully so, because the policies of Europe got adopted here. We've had a relatively rapid rise in our electricity price. Electricity prices are still rising. And why are they rising? They're rising all in this name of climate change, that we've shut down the things that have powered our electric grid. Coal was the largest source of global electricity for 125 years, is today, and will be for decades more to come. Not in the United States. In the United States, it was the largest source of electricity for almost 100 years, and then natural gas outcompeted it. Today, natural gas is by far our biggest source of electricity, at over 40%. Nuclear is about 20%. Coal is a little bit less than 20%. But we've put a whole bunch of wind and solar and batteries on our grid. And the impact of that is for almost 100 years, we had declining inflation-adjusted prices of electricity. And now we've started to make electricity prices more expensive. And as I walk into this seat, the FERC, our Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, the queue at FERC and the resource plans as filed by the utilities, they have the plan to close 100 gigawatts in the next 5 years. That's like 10% of US capacity, 100 gigawatts, mostly of coal and natural gas, but plants that can produce electricity 24/7, whether the wind is blowing or the sun is shining, and build 22 gigawatts. So a net shrinkage of 78 gigawatts is the plan that's in our system right now over the next 5 years. If we want to stay ahead of China and AI, we need to grow our firm generating capacity by at least 100 gigawatts. So I inherit a plan that's minus 78, and I got to get it to plus 100.
So how do you see AI, the pressure that AI is going to put on the system?
It's well, we have to move fast. I called AI Manhattan Project 2. We developed an atomic bomb during World War II. Germany had an atomic bomb program as well. Imagine our world today if we got second and they got the atomic bomb first. I don't know what it is, but it's not this world. AI is going to have massive national defense and national security ramifications. China got meaningfully ahead of us in AI. We become the secondary nation of the planet. That's a different world we don't want to go to as well. We need to lead in AI. We have the companies, we have the technologies, we have the scientists, we have the private capital here. So the only thing that'll prevent us from leading in AI is the failure to build this electric generating capacity. It needs to happen. So I'm using emergency powers to stop closure of coal plants. We're expediting the permitting of building of new plants. And we're doing everything we can to make it easy to build power generation and data centers in our country. I think AI will be a home run for productivity of businesses, for consumer. It's going to make everyone smarter and more effective. I think it could also be a leveler in our society. When computers and programming came out when I was young, it was a bit of an attenuator. That the people that were at the high end of intellectual capabilities, they got accelerated even more, and they left behind others. It grew, it magnified gaps. AI could do the opposite. If you're curious and you're inquisitive and you want to know something, but you don't have great quantitative skills, the computer's going to do that for you. It's going to lift everyone else up and maybe be a little bit more of a leveling force. Right. We want that coming.
So I'm just going to ask a couple more questions because then we're going to open it up for questions. But you mentioned wind and solar. We've just seen is it a cancellation or termination? You'll explain what it is of the Revolution Wind project off of Rhode Island when it's 80%. What is your attitude? What's the administration's view of wind and solar and their role in the mix?
So there's a stop work order on Revolution. So it's not a cancellation. It's under construction. These were permitted rather quickly. I don't know if everyone remembers last summer when the giant turbine blade fell in the ocean and littered the beaches of Nantucket, closed the beaches for the second half of the summer in Nantucket. If you do something fast and quickly, because we're in a crisis and it must happen, bad things happen. You know, why are right whales dying? And what's happening to our fish population? The Defense Department, of course, is worried. If you want to bring a drone swarm into the United States, you could fly right through a wind farm and no one would detect a huge drone swarm. And of course, the coastal residents don't like them either. So there's a lot of opposition to offshore wind that was just, shoved under the rug. So I think a more thorough look is going on about that.
What about onshore wind and solar?
And the other thing about the cost, offshore wind is roughly twice the cost of onshore wind. But the problem of wind and solar, and look, I worked in solar. Solar has a future. One of our things was get rid of the subsidies. We shouldn't be paying people, the wind subsidies are 33 years old. If an industry can't stand on itself after 33 years, it's not an industry. It's just a farmer of subsidies. The problem of wind and solar is the sun doesn't always shine and the wind doesn't always blow. So peak demand here at PJM, where we're sitting, right? 65 million people, inauguration day was very cold. That was peak demand, it was very cold. At the peak demand time, we got less than 3% of our electricity from wind, solar, and batteries. Coal, natural gas, hydro, well over coal, natural gas, and nuclear, over 80% of that power. Hydro, we even burnt oil, was 4% of the electricity at peak demand. If you're burning oil for electricity, it means the grid is very tight. It's an emergency thing. I forced to keep open a 100-year-old oil plant too, because otherwise you get blackouts. But if wind and solar aren't there at peak demand, they don't really provide any value to the grid. People say we need all the electrons we get. It's not like a gas station, or a gas tank where you just fill it up. You have to match supply and demand at all times. If the wind blows a lot at night when demand for electricity is low, that doesn't enable us to do anything else. It just means all the other generating capacity has to turn down a little bit.
Right. So let me ask you, take you back to your youth. Full circle, nuclear, fission, fusion, really a renaissance of discussion going on about it now, renaissance of effort. How do you see its role and its evolution and the timing for small nuclear reactors?
So commercial nuclear power started in the United States in the mid-1950s. By the mid-1970s, we had 100 plants under construction, a lot of them completed. 20% of US electricity came from that. Then we created the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. Since the creation of the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, there have been 2 reactors that have been permitted, construction, and online. So, and there's other reasons besides the NRC, but I think our government smothered and killed nuclear power.
So does nuclear come back in a significant way?
That is the hope, but it's hard. If you kill something for a few decades, the supply chain's gone, the efficiency's gone. We don't even enrich uranium in the United States. No American company enriches uranium in the United States to go into any of our 100 plants. So we've just strangled so much of that supply chain. So the administration and my department is doing everything we can to get the nuclear industry back on its feet. And the hyperscalers, the people that want to build data centers, are massively helpful for that. They'll put in equity capital. They are helping hugely to get nuclear going again. But yes, we will see shovels in the ground. 12 plants will be under construction in the next couple of years.
Does DOE have a timing for when they think small modular reactors roughly will start to roll out?
We'll have them we will have multiple small modular reactors critical, meaning running and producing heat next year at our Idaho National Lab. So the same reactors that'll be built to generate electricity, but they'll be built in a test lands and we'll have them running. But again, to be producing electrons going into the grid, that's probably more 5 or 6 years out. But lots will be under construction in the next couple of years, and they will become a major energy source again. Right. You look at the climate movement was really about incrementally reducing greenhouse gas emissions. It would be celebrating natural gas, by far the biggest source of reduced greenhouse gas emissions, and nuclear, which is the other energy technology that could reduce it a lot. Nuclear was 6% of global energy in the year 2000. It's 4% today. We need to get that reversed and get nuclear rolling again, because 24/7, 365, and not just electricity. It can provide process heat, the most important kind of energy.
One last quick question before we go to the audience here and in New York. You're leaving shortly for Milan for the big gas conference there. Role of US LNG internationally. I'm sure that will be a subject of discussion.
Yeah, 20 years ago, the United States was the biggest importer of natural gas in the planet. And we had over 1,000 drilling rigs drilling for natural gas in our country. Today, we're by far the largest exporter of natural gas in the planet. We've more than doubled our gas production, and we have 110 rigs drilling for natural gas. Like, that's technology, that's innovation. 1,100 rigs to 110 rigs, and now we're the world's largest exporter. It'll soon be, I think in this administration, it'll become the single largest export of our country, because exports will double during this administration. So this is a way to get European allies off Russian gas.
I mean, people don't think about it as our largest export.
It is, and natural gas also, I'm sorry, I'm very much a numbers nerd. From the end of the financial crisis, 2010 to today, the fastest growing energy source on the planet by far is natural gas. Right. So I'm going to bring that message of natural gas is a rapidly growing fuel. It's a way to get off Russian gas. It's for countries to have build up industries in their countries as well. It's much cheaper than oil. The great thing about gas is much more plentiful than oil. It's much cheaper than oil. China and India are going to convert 1/3 of their trucks that run on diesel today to run on natural gas. Right. Even though they're getting natural gas shipped over the ocean from us, so it's much more expensive than the natural gas in the United States, but it's still much cheaper than diesel. Think about reshoring energy-intensive manufacturing in our country with this abundant source of natural gas. That's what's going to power our data centers. That's what's going to bring semiconductors and steel and aluminum back to the United States. And jobs.
Right. So we're open for questions. I think there are 4 roving mics here, and somebody has it under control in New York as well. So any questions? Henri? And please, short questions.
Yes, Henri Baki from the council. What I don't understand is you want the private sector to do whether it's nuclear or gas, etc. And now you're essentially putting stop orders on a whole series of wind farms. Why don't you let this? And they've already invested billions of dollars in this endeavor, and you're stopping them from producing or from finishing their projects. And the more energy is produced.
Henri, let him answer.
Totally legitimate question. That's exactly the hard dialogues that are going in right now. But if you look at the permitting that was done, it was going to be protect the fisheries, protect the whales, protect the coastlines. Were things done legitimately in a safe and beneficial way to our country is a very real question mark. So it's a stop work order to understand, is this actually beneficial? I understand your concern. I share it. But there's a flip side to that. There is massive environmental and economic opposition to offshore wind, and this is going to be sorted out.
Right, there's a question.
But legitimate question.
Right here in this first table, and then the person behind.
Pani Talwar, former U.S. ambassador to Morocco. Could you tell us a little bit about, Mr. Secretary, where you see fuel cells fitting into the mix, particularly to meet the surge that we're seeing in demand right now?
Well, fuel cells take hydrogen, and instead of combusting it, it's a different chemical process to release energy. The problem there is hydrogen really is come out as an energy source as a way to store more energy than batteries can store. Or natural gas. Well, using that, you got to strip the hydrogen from the natural gas to run it in a fuel cell. Yeah.
Right.
So the question is economics. Energy is about, in my mind, about humans. We want more energy because it benefits humans, and does the math work? So if fuel cells become economically competitive, and in some applications they will grow, and I'll celebrate it.
Right behind Mike there.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Jeremy Harrell, I'm the CEO of ClearPath, the clean energy organization here in DC. I wanted to ask about the innovation agenda. Your team has been reviewing how the Biden administration utilized resources and tools to try to drive new technologies forward over the last 7 months. How has that review shaped how you view the department's going to partner with the private sector to bring new technologies forward that can meet that rising demand that we're seeing from AI, from American manufacturing tools like LPO?
Yeah. Innovation is besides my wife and children, the love of my life. And we have ARPA-E at the department, where we fund a lot of small innovative companies. Then we use both grants that are money from Congress and our loan program office to spur innovation. Fusion is coming. We are supporting multiple fusion efforts. We are restarting the first ever restarted nuclear power plant in Michigan. We're supporting the development of that. We're supporting the development of new energy technologies, new innovations, onshoring materials. So yes, the 17 national labs, truly gems of our country, are all under the Department of Energy. I have visited 14 of the 17 already in my first 8 months. I will visit the last 3 before the year is over. And I could not be more excited about what's coming in the innovation pipeline.
Right. I see there's a question from New York.
We'll take the next question from Barbara Slavin.
Hi, I'm actually in Washington, but I'm Barbara Slavin from the Stimson Center. And my question is about batteries. You talked about wind and solar and how you can't use the energy if the wind doesn't blow or the sun doesn't shine. There are batteries now which can solve that problem. Are you investing in massive batteries that can provide cheap energy, that are built in this country, and that can use all sorts of energy, including solar and wind, very, very productively?
So short answer is yes. We have multiple projects we're supporting for both supply chain for batteries in the US, and maybe most importantly, for a new battery technology that can store long duration energy at a lower cost. But yes, we are all about that. Definitely energy storage is a plus. But again, I'm about the numbers. If you take all the batteries in the United States, including all the batteries in the electric cars, you can store our electric grid energy production for 5 minutes. So when you get a cold front, in like when 200 people died for the storm Uri in Texas, that was 3 or 4 days of massively elevated demand. So the road from 5 minutes to 72 hours to 100 hours is a very long road. So that we need more affordable energy storage. Today, the cost of energy storage makes firming or making wind and solar firm, meaning 24 hours a day, increases their cost 5 to 15-fold. So we don't have a practical way to firm wind and solar today, but it would be awesome if we did.
Right. Question right there.
Rod Lewis, the Journals Group founder, and do some strategic advising for private equity and universities. You mentioned that you're inspired when the CU instructor came down to your high school. You mentioned the Manhattan Project. The crown jewel of our innovation is higher education and our labs. Can you just talk to us a little bit about how you will utilize higher education in the U.S. and how that ties to the labs with some of the policies that are moving forward within your department, sir?
No, absolutely. I love that question. Look, energy and everything has so much room for innovation in the future. Like, I'm so excited about the next generation, but it depends on our kids. It depends on people that are going to school. I speak in elementary schools, junior highs, high schools, and universities, trying to get people fired up about innovation and to study math, science, and technology careers. Of course, there's other things to study too, but I'm biased. And so I really want to get that going. The labs are great places where kids intern, that gets people into technical fields. I will say climate change has been a major negative here too. When I go to high schools and people hear about the science, if you're against the science, it's an authoritarian top-down thing. That's a turnoff for kids. Who wants to be part of a thing where you got to conform or you're going to be scorned? We got to reinvigorate the excitement of science. There's no the science, there's science, which is challenging and investigation and debate and data. But yes, we want to, any way we can, energize our universities and get them going again. I visited with a lot of university students and universities in my first 8 months tours. And of course, we got a lot of great, excited, optimistic Americans. We gotta arm them, and we gotta keep arming them with optimism and belief in their own ability to make change.
Mark?
So.
And I see there's some questions in the back, and they'll try to come to the front again.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you, Secretary Wright. Mark Finley with Rice University's Baker Institute. How do you manage the tension between a desire for cheap, affordable oil and gas, for our domestic economy and our allies, and the need for a price that's sufficiently high enough to drill, baby, drill, to have the supply to meet that?
Oh, so I get asked that a lot. And Mark, thanks for the question. But again, markets set prices. Markets set prices. So what you see right now, I think, is the markets reflecting like, oh my God, this administration's serious. They're going to allow entrepreneurs to build pipelines and processing facilities and export terminals. We're going to get more production. And if you're going to get more production, you don't see more demand, well, prices get pushed down. But marketplaces will continue to reflect that. Our goal is if we can lower the cost to produce all forms of energy, and the way we can do that, if we can lower the price to produce it, wherever the price will oscillate, but that center point will be pushed down. Right now, prices are low, and we're seeing reduced drilling, but still record ever oil prices, record ever national gas production. But marketplace is going to move prices around. We hope their average is lower than it used to be. And today it is.
So I think back there, the lady right there, sort of in the middle.
Thanks, Dan. Elisa Newman-Hood with Accelerate Energy. I did want to ask you, Secretary Wright, how you believe that, or how you see that U.S. LNG can help redress trade imbalances, which is obviously of such importance to this administration, and in particular, which countries can we expect to see import more U.S. LNG as a result?
So great question, and thanks for your role in this very effort. As I mentioned today, it depends how you categorize them or count them, but natural gas is one of the top few exports of the United States, but it's the fastest growing. In a few years, it's probably our single largest export. So yes, if we want to reduce trade deficit, growing natural gas exports is a huge opportunity. We see it across the world. I think Europe are pretty dead set on getting off Russian gas. They still consume Russian gas. They still consume pipeline gas and Russian LNG. So there's a lot of market share grab we can still do in Europe. Asia, of course, is the fastest growing market for LNG. Our allies all in the Pacific Rim, Taiwan, Japan, South Korea, Philippines, Vietnam. Like, I think we will see, but Hawaii and Puerto Rico need more natural gas, and that'll be LNG. Latin America, North Africa. So I'm quite bullish that the market pull on natural gas growth is there. In fact, the first on inauguration night, the Indian foreign minister came up to me and said, we're investing in infrastructure to use natural gas. Coal's their main energy source, but can we trust the United States as a supplier? There was still a pause in place at that time on new LNG export terminals. How can we invest? You need infrastructure. Natural gas is cheap, but you need infrastructure to move it. Should we invest in it if you're going to be an unreliable supplier? So one of my jobs the last 8 months has been through approvals, through permitting, through speaking, is to build confidence the U.S. will continue to grow our LNG exports and we will be a reliable supplier.
Right here, there's a question right in front here.
Mr. Secretary, Oda Aberdeen, the Capital Trust Group. Historically speaking, the highest inflation rates in the U.S. occurred because of oil disruption in the Middle East.
Speak a little louder.
In 1973, during the Iranian Revolution.
I'll repeat it too.
Yeah.
What are you doing to keep the price of oil stable in view of the fact that the region, the Middle East, is very volatile, very unstable? War could break out anytime.
So great question, which was
And of
the
course,
highest.
back then we didn't have shale, so.
Right. The highest inflation we've experienced in the United States was in the 1970s because of threats and real and perceived threats on oil supply out of the Middle East. And the world runs on oil. That drove huge inflation. There's a lot of turmoil in the Middle East today. How are we going to prevent prices from rising there? And I would say one thing is the shale revolution and the messaging and posture and policies of the Trump administration allowed us to go through Israel attacking Iran, the United States playing a role in that, all over fear of Iran's nuclear weapons program. We went through that with a little bit of a bump up in oil prices, but not a lot actually. And so I think we showed that we're much more resilient than we were in the 1970s to that thing of oil prices. And it is very key. As Churchill said, security comes from diversity. We need oil production all around the world, but the U.S. being by far the largest producer and actually having room to ramp up our production, not rapidly, not overnight, not in weeks, but in months and years to grow our production, I think has been a stabilizer on oil prices. They've been volatile the last 5 years, but less volatile than they were before. I hope we continue to see a reduction in the volatility of oil price, and I hope a reduction in the inflation-adjusted average price of oil going forward as well. But again, great question.
Secretary Wright has an intense travel schedule, so he's going to have to leave us now. So I know there's several questions that haven't been called upon, but please join me in thanking Secretary Chris Wright for being with us today.